The Forbidden Question. The holographic star map flickered above the curved desk, casting blue light across Zora's focused face. As a third-year student at the Stellar Academy on Nexus Prime, she had studied thousands of galactic charts, but something about this one bothered her. The young Kilari female leaned closer, her silver eyes tracing the familiar spiral arms of their galaxy. Trade routes stretched like glowing threads between systems, marking the vast network that connected hundreds of civilizations. Yet there, near what the older maps called the Outer Rim, sat a perfect circle of nothing. "Computer, enhance Sector 7 Alpha," she commanded. The map zoomed in, revealing the strange void in greater detail. No stars, no trade routes, no colonial markers, just empty space with a simple label that read Restricted Zone 7 Alpha. Navigation prohibited by Galactic Council Decree 2847. Zora frowned. In 3 years of advanced cartography studies, she had never encountered a zone so completely blank. Even the most dangerous regions of space, areas filled with black holes or radiation storms, still appeared on the maps with proper warnings. This was different. This was deliberate erasure. She pulled up her personal notes and began cross-referencing the void with historical star charts. Her fingers moved quickly across the light panel, accessing databases that most students never bothered to explore. Hours passed as she dug deeper into the Academy's vast archives. What she found made her heart skip a beat. In charts dated before Galactic Year 2847, the void wasn't empty at all. It showed a cluster of systems with names she didn't recognize. Sol, Alpha Centauri, Wolf 359, Barnard Star. And at the center of it all, a small blue planet labeled simply as Earth, human homeworld. Humans, she whispered to herself. The name felt strange on her tongue, like speaking a word from a dead language. She searched the Academy's biological databases for any reference to this species. Nothing. She tried the historical archives. Again, nothing. It was as if an entire civilization had been carefully removed from every record, leaving only the faintest traces in old star charts that someone had forgotten to update. The sound of approaching footsteps made her look up. Professor Keth, her elderly Vorthek mentor, walked toward her desk with his usual measured pace. His forearms moved in the traditional greeting gesture as he approached. "Student Zora, you have been here for many hours. The learning halls close soon." "Professor," she said, pointing to the hologram, "I found something strange in the old archives. There's a species called humans that seems to have been erased from all our records. Do you know anything about them?" Professor Keth's normally calm demeanor shifted. His dark eyes grew wide, and his secondary arms twitched nervously. He looked around the empty study hall before moving closer to her desk. "Lower your voice, young one," he whispered urgently. "That is not a name spoken in these halls." "But why? What happened to them? Did they go extinct? Were they destroyed in some war?" Professor Keth was quiet for a long moment, his four hands working nervously. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "Some questions, student Zora, are more dangerous than the answers they seek. If you are wise, you will forget what you have found and focus on your assigned studies." But Zora had never been one to leave mysteries unsolved. After Professor Keth left, she remained at her desk, diving deeper into the Academy's oldest archives. Hidden in a forgotten section of the database, she found a single entry that made her blood run cold. It was a casualty report from something called the Silent War, dated over 500 years ago. The document was heavily corrupted, but she could make out fragments: human forces, unprecedented resistance, entire fleets, no survivors, Council emergency session, Decree 2847, all records to be sealed. She was so absorbed in her research that she didn't notice the figure approaching until a shadow fell across her desk. A tall Krex male stood beside her, his reptilian features weathered by years of space travel. Unlike the academic robes worn by most people in the halls, he wore the practical gray uniform of a deep space explorer. "You're looking in dangerous places, young scholar," he said, his voice rough but not unkind. Zara looked up, startled. "I'm sorry. I don't think we've been introduced. Captain Jorik of the merchant vessel Wandering Star, and you're the student who's been asking questions about humans." Her hearts began beating faster. "How did you know?" Jorik pulled up a chair and sat down, his movements careful and deliberate. "Because word travels fast when someone starts digging into forbidden history. Professor Keth contacted an old friend who contacted me. He's worried about you. Then you know about them. About the humans?" Jorik was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "I know enough to understand why the Council wants them forgotten. The question is, why do you want to remember?" "Because truth matters," Zara said firmly. "Because entire civilizations don't just disappear without reason. Because if we don't understand our history, we're doomed to repeat it." Something in her voice seemed to convince him. Jorik leaned forward, lowering his voice to match her intensity. "Very well. But what I tell you cannot leave this room, and you must promise me that you will not act foolishly on what you learn." Zara nodded eagerly. "I was young during the last days of the Silent War," Jorik began. "Too young to fight, but old enough to remember the fear. The humans weren't like us, weren't like any species in the Galactic Council. They were different. Different how? They were stubborn in a way that defied logic. When other species would surrender or negotiate, humans would fight until the very end. When we would retreat to preserve resources, they would advance to protect principles. But that wasn't what made them dangerous." Jorik paused, his eyes growing distant with memory. What made them dangerous was that they learned. Every battle, every defeat, every small victory, they absorbed the lessons and became stronger. While our various species fought with the same tactics our ancestors had used for millennia, humans evolved their strategies with every engagement. So they were better warriors. "No," Jorik said, shaking his head. "They were better at becoming better. Do you understand the difference?" Zara considered this. "They adapted faster than anyone else." "Exactly. And when the Council powers tried to contain them, tried to limit their expansion, they didn't just resist. They revolutionized warfare itself. They created weapons we had never imagined, tactics we couldn't counter, strategies that turned our own strengths against us." "What started the war?" Jorik's expression grew grim. "That's where the official story and the truth part ways. The records that survived, the ones hidden deep in classified archives, tell a different tale than what most people believe." He looked around again, ensuring they were still alone. "The humans didn't start the Silent War. We did. The Council powers, afraid of human expansion and innovation, decided to solve the human problem before it became unmanageable. We attacked their colonies, bombed their trade ships, imposed blockades on their systems." Zara felt a chill run through her. "You attacked them first. We thought it would be simple. Humans were young, technologically inferior in many ways, and they had no allies. The Council believed a quick, decisive strike would force them to accept permanent restrictions on their expansion. But it didn't work." "Oh, it worked better than we could have imagined," Jorik said bitterly. "It united them, every human in the galaxy, from the smallest colony to their homeworld of Earth, became part of a single, focused war machine. But they didn't just fight back. They fought forward." He activated his personal data pad and showed her a heavily encrypted file. The image was grainy, but she could make out what looked like a massive space station. This was taken near the end of the war, a human deep space installation called Prometheus Base. It was larger than most moons and housed technologies that our greatest minds still can't understand. They built it in less than 2 years, while fighting a war across dozens of systems. How is that possible? Because when humans are pushed to their limits, they don't break. They transcend them. They took our weapons and made them better. They studied our tactics and created counters. They faced impossible odds and found ways to make the impossible routine." Zara stared at the image, trying to process what she was learning. If they were so powerful, what happened to them? Why aren't they still here? Jorik's expression grew even more serious. That's where the story becomes truly disturbing. The humans didn't just win the silent war. They won it so completely, so decisively, that the surviving council species begged for mercy. And they showed mercy. They did something worse than mercy. They showed wisdom. Jorik closed the data pad and leaned back in his chair. When the council representatives came to Earth to surrender, the humans made them an offer. They would withdraw from galactic politics, would remain in their own systems, would allow themselves to be erased from history. In exchange, they asked for only one thing. What? They asked for time. Time to see if the galaxy could learn to be better. Time to see if the species that had tried to destroy them could grow beyond their fear and hatred. Time to see if the next generation might be worthy of contact. The implications of Jorik's words hit Zara like a physical blow. They're still out there. Oh yes, and they're watching. They've been watching for 500 years, waiting to see if we've learned anything from the war we started. Zara stood up abruptly, her mind racing. That's why the zone is restricted. That's why the records were sealed. The Council doesn't want anyone to know that humanity is still out there, judging us. Now you begin to understand, Jorik said. But understanding and wisdom are different things. What will you do with this knowledge? Zara looked at the star map, still showing the empty void where human space should be. For the first time in her life, she understood that some boundaries existed not to keep others out, but to keep everyone else safe until they were ready for what lay beyond. I want to meet them, she said quietly. Jorik stood up, his expression grave. I was afraid you might say that. Will you help me? The old captain studied her for a long moment, weighing something she couldn't understand. Finally, he nodded slowly. There's a ship leaving the outer rim tomorrow. If you're truly committed to this path, if you understand that there may be no return, then perhaps it's time someone from our generation tried to answer the question the humans have been asking. What question? Whether we've learned enough to deserve a second chance. The Awakening. The modified cargo ship Seeker's Hope drifted silently through the void, its engines powered down to minimize their energy signature. Zara stood at the observation deck, watching the stars ahead with a mixture of excitement and terror. 3 days had passed since they'd crossed the official boundary of Restricted Zone 7 Alpha, and still no sign of human presence. Captain Jorik joined her at the viewport, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. Having second thoughts. Every minute, Zara admitted. But that doesn't mean I want to turn back. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft chime from the bridge. The ship's AI announced in its neutral tone, Warning. Unknown scanning beam detected. Origin unknown. Purpose unknown. Jorik and Zara exchanged glances before rushing to the bridge. The display screen showed nothing unusual, but the ship's sensors were detecting patterns of energy that defied their understanding of known technology. How long have we been scanned? Jorik asked the AI. Scanning began approximately 72 hours ago, shortly after crossing the boundary coordinates. Zara felt her heart skip. They'd been watching us for 3 days. Before Jorik could answer, every system on the ship suddenly went dark. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in a red glow, but their engines, weapons, and communication systems were completely dead. Yet somehow, life support continued to function normally. This is impossible, Jorik muttered, frantically checking manual controls. A selective system shutdown like this would require technology we don't even have theories for. The main screen flickered to life, displaying a simple message in perfect galactic standard. Remain calm. Do not attempt to restart your systems. You will be contacted shortly. They waited in tense silence for nearly an hour before something appeared on their sensors. A ship, sleek and dark, roughly the size of a council cruiser but with lines unlike anything in their databases. It approached without haste, as if its occupants had all the time in the universe. The communication system activated on its own, and a voice filled the bridge. It spoke in accented galactic standard, the pronunciation slightly different from what they were used to. Unknown vessel, you have entered restricted space. State your purpose. Jorik looked at Zara, who took a deep breath before responding. This is Zora Kethvar of the Stellar Academy. I'm seeking contact with human representatives. There was a long pause before the voice responded. That is a name we have not heard spoken aloud in many years. Why do you seek this contact? Because I believe it's time for our species to face the truth about our shared history. Another pause, longer this time. Then, you will be brought aboard our vessel. Do not resist the boarding tube when it connects. A section of the human ship extended toward them, forming a flexible tunnel that connected to their airlock. Zara and Jorik found themselves in a pristine white corridor that seemed to pulse with subtle energy. They were escorted by two figures in form-fitting suits that seemed more like a second skin than traditional clothing. The humans were taller than most council species, with features that seemed somehow both familiar and alien. Their escorts said nothing as they walked through corridors lined with displays showing star charts, technical diagrams, and images of worlds Zora didn't recognize. They were brought to a comfortable chamber where a woman waited for them. She appeared to be middle-aged by human standards, with short dark hair streaked with gray and eyes that seemed to hold the weight of centuries. Her clothing was simple but well-made, and she carried herself with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to command. I am Commander Elena Vasquez, she said, gesturing for them to sit. I am one of the few remaining humans who remember the time before the silence. Jorik leaned forward. You remember the war? I remember everything, Elena said simply. My people have very long memories, Captain Jorik. We remember kindness, and we remember betrayal with equal clarity. Zara found her voice. Then you know why we're here. I know why you think you're here, Elena corrected gently. But the real question is whether you're prepared for what you might learn. She touched a control surface, and the walls of the chamber became transparent, revealing a view that took their breath away. They were looking at a massive structure in space, clearly artificial but beautiful beyond description. It was part station, part city, part garden, with sections that seemed to grow and flow like living tissue. This is Haven Station, Elena explained, home to approximately 2 million humans, and the center of our civilization in this region of space. You have 2 million people here. Zora gasped. Here, yes, but Haven is just one of many such installations. When we withdrew from galactic society, we didn't diminish. We evolved. Elena walked to what appeared to be a solid wall, but as she approached, it became transparent, revealing another chamber beyond. Inside, Zora could see humans working with technologies that seemed like magic. She watched as one individual manipulated matter with their bare hands, reshaping metal, as if it were clay. The war changed us, Elena continued, not just tactically or strategically, but fundamentally. When we were forced to fight for survival, we discovered capabilities we never knew we possessed. We learned to adapt not just our tools and tactics, but ourselves. You mean you're not the same species you were 500 years ago? Biologically, we're still human, but we've learned to use more of our potential than we ever thought possible. The war taught us that limitations are often just failures of imagination. Jorik spoke up. If you've become so advanced, why haven't you returned to the galaxy? Why maintain the isolation? Elena's expression grew sad. Because power without wisdom is the path to tyranny. We learned that lesson from watching the Council powers. When we withdrew, we made ourselves a promise. We would not return to the galaxy until we were certain we had grown beyond the flaws that made the war necessary. And have you? That's not for us to judge, Elena said. That's why we've been watching, waiting for someone from your generation to seek us out. Not to conquer or exploit, but to understand. She led them to another section of the station, where they could see vast laboratories and workshops. Humans worked alongside machines that seemed to think and learn, creating technologies that defied everything Zora thought she knew about physics. "We could return tomorrow if we chose," Alina said. "We could solve your energy crisis and your territorial disputes, cure diseases that have plagued Council species for millennia. But would that make you better, or just more dependent?" Zara began to understand. "You're waiting for us to grow up. We're waiting for evidence that the galaxy has learned from its mistakes, that the next time a young species emerges with new ideas and capabilities, the established powers won't try to crush them out of fear." They spent hours talking, with Alina sharing carefully chosen glimpses of human civilization. Zara learned that humanity had not simply survived in isolation. They had flourished. They had developed art forms that incorporated mathematics as beauty, created music that could heal psychological trauma, and built cities that existed in harmony with the natural forces of their environments. But more than their achievements, Zara was struck by their patience. These were people who could reshape the galaxy, yet they chose restraint. They had been wronged, yet they sought understanding rather than revenge. "What would it take?" she finally asked. "What would need to change for humans to consider rejoining galactic society?" Alina smiled, the first truly warm expression Zora had seen from her. "You're asking the right question. That alone is progress." She activated another display, showing a map of Council space with various markers and notations. "We've been monitoring galactic developments for 5 centuries. We've seen improvements. The Kileri stopped their expansion wars. The Vorthak abolished their case system. The Krex reformed their judicial codes. But we've also seen the same old patterns: fear of change, suppression of innovation, the strong dominating the weak. So what would convince you? Actions, not words. We need to see that the Council species can handle first contact with a truly unknown civilization without immediately trying to control or destroy it. We need to see justice applied equally across species lines. We need to see curiosity valued over comfort." Alina touched another control, and suddenly they were looking at Earth itself, a blue and green jewel hanging in space, surrounded by massive orbital installations. "This is our homeworld," she said softly. 4 billion humans live here, most of them born after the silence began. They've grown up hearing stories of the galaxy beyond, wondering if the time will ever come when they can walk freely among the stars again. Zara felt tears forming in her eyes. "They're waiting for us to prove we deserve them. They're waiting for proof that the galaxy has grown beyond the fear and hatred that created the war. Your journey here, your questions, your courage in seeking truth despite the dangers, these are encouraging signs." "What happens now?" Jorik asked. Belina looked at both of them seriously. "Now you face a choice. You can return to your people and share what you've learned, knowing that it will change everything. The knowledge that humanity survives, that we've grown beyond your current understanding, that we're watching and judging. That knowledge will terrify some and inspire others. And if we choose not to return, then you stay here, become part of our community, and help us prepare for the day when contact might be renewed. Either choice has consequences you cannot predict." Zara didn't hesitate. "I want to go back. I want to tell them what I've learned." Alina nodded approvingly. "I hoped you would say that. But understand, young scholar, that you won't be returning alone." "What do you mean?" "We're going to send an ambassador with you, someone to observe how the Council reacts to the news of our survival. Their response will help us determine whether the time for renewed contact has truly arrived." She gestured toward the viewport, where another ship was visible, smaller than the station, but still impressive in its elegant design. "If the Council responds with fear and hostility, if they try to suppress the truth or prepare for war, then we'll know the galaxy still isn't ready. But if they respond with wisdom, with genuine desire for understanding and cooperation, then perhaps the long isolation can finally end." Zara felt the weight of history settling on her shoulders. Her simple desire to understand a mystery in an old star chart had led to this moment, a chance to bridge a gap 5 centuries in the making. What if they're not ready? she asked. What if they react with fear? Alina's expression grew gentle but firm. Then we wait longer. We've waited 500 years. We can wait 500 more if necessary. But we hope, for all our sakes, that won't be needed. As they prepared to leave Haven Station, Zara realized that her journey was just beginning. She had come seeking answers about the past, but instead she had found a responsibility for the future. The empty space on the galactic maps wasn't empty at all. It was full of hope, patience, and the possibility of redemption. The humans hadn't been erased from history. They had chosen to step back from it, waiting for the moment when they could step forward again without repeating the mistakes that had led to war. Now that moment might finally be at hand, and its success or failure would depend on how well the galaxy had learned from its own painful past. As the Seeker's hope powered up for the journey home, escorted by its human companionship, Zara understood that she was no longer just a student of cartography. She had become a bridge between two eras of galactic history, carrying the hopes of millions who dreamed of a future where fear no longer determined the boundaries between worlds. The maps would have to be redrawn. The question was whether they would be drawn in ink or in blood.